So some interesting news talking about the Hurt Business this week, of course. The Hurt Business, Bobby Lashley, MVP, Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin split, divided on Monday Night Raw this week. But there is some news on MVP and Bobby Lashley, the WWE Champion, meeting with WWE Chairman Vince McMahon over the Hurt Business's breakup on Monday night. Now, fans, of course, on social media and around the world weren't the only ones surprised by the fracturing of the Hurt Business on Monday Night Raw this past week, as the members of the group were also reportedly shocked and unhappy about what happened. Now, as I just mentioned, Monday Night Raw saw MVP and WWE Champion Bobby Lashley get rid of both Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander from the faction. The tension had been building for the past few weeks, but this time things got physical, and Lashley later defeated Benjamin in a singles match on the broadcast, warning Alexander he could meet the same fate next week if he wanted. Now, in an update, WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon reportedly made the final decision to split up the group, and Vince only. This is according to Fightful Select, which is Fightful's Patreon service. If you haven't subscribed already, be sure to check that out. They break a lot of exclusive stories, so be sure to go over there and subscribe. This decision was made, though, to the chagrin, much chagrin, of all of the members of the group. Lashley and MVP were reportedly very vocal about not supporting the decision, but Vince was not budging and dug his heels in, according to Fightful. Lashley and MVP met with Vince at Raw about the idea to break up the group, but word is that Vince, quote, dug his heels in even more, end quote, at that meeting. It was noted by several locker room sources that the decision and how Vince McMahon insisted on splitting the group up was a blow to morale backstage. MVP stated this week that the Hurt Business lives on with he and Lashley. It was noted before how MVP revealed that he and Lashley are accepting worthy applicants, indicating that there could be new members being added to the group in the future. Lashley recently spoke about wanting to recruit a female superstar. I've been saying for the longest time on this channel that I think Naomi is tailor-made for the Hurt Business on Monday Night Raw. We could see that post-WrestleMania, I don't know. Now, of course, Bobby Lashley has a busy few days coming up soon. He is set to headline WrestleMania 37 Night 1 against Drew McIntyre on April 10. The stipulation attached to the match said that Benjamin and Cedric Alexander were banned from ringside after McIntyre defeated them in a 2-on-1 handicap match last week. So, obviously, and this is the story that I think most people expected to come out regarding this, is that people weren't happy. People weren't happy about it, and people were surprised by it. And this is usually par for the course nowadays when it comes to WWE programming. If there's a decision or a storyline, a match, an angle, whatever you want to call it, on WWE television, where you're watching that as a fan at home, you're watching it and you say to yourself, man, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Or not only does it not make any sense, but I wouldn't do that. Or why would they do that? That's confusing. Or this isn't the right time, etc., etc. You're not the only one that thinks that. Usually the talent thinks that. Usually a lot of the agents think that. Usually a lot of the writers think that. Usually when it comes to big decisions like this, it's one of two people. Ultimately, most of the time it's Vince McMahon. It's Vince McMahon's company and it's Vince McMahon's show at the end of the day, and what he says go. Or it could be someone like Bruce Pritchard, who is of course the executive director of both Raw and SmackDown. Usually it's one of those two, but ultimately 9 times out of 10 it's usually Vince McMahon's call. And I think sometimes we have to be almost careful when we dissect this kind of stuff, because ultimately, and I think this is probably what MVP and Bobby Lashley found out on Monday Night Raw this past week, that when these kind of conversations come up and these kind of decisions come down the pipeline and they say, you're going to break up tonight, and they go to talk to Vince McMahon, after talking with him for a while, then you kind of realize that, like I said, it's his company. And the analogy that it's his toy box, they're his toys, and he can do what he wants with them. And that's it sometimes. And sometimes you might have to manage the situation a bit better. Sometimes it's a case of, and I know myself, sometimes I could be like this. If I'm told sometimes that what I'm doing or my idea is the worst idea or the most terrible idea, sometimes you do dig your heels in. Go, no, that makes me want to do it even more. You know, that kind of stuff. Maybe that's the case with Vince McMahon. I don't know. Personally, I'm with the majority on this one. I don't even think there's a minority. I think the minority is Vince McMahon in this decision to break up the Hurt Business. It is the wrong decision. It is the wrong decision. And I know I did a video yesterday on it, so I don't want to repeat what I said too much. But I think back to it, and the end of the show obviously had King Corbin come out and he attacked Drew McIntyre, and the ending point of the show was that you've got Bobby Lashley, King Corbin, and Drew McIntyre in the ring. They were once a faction on Monday Night Raw in 2018, and it's Drew McIntyre's past coming back to haunt him. That was kind of the idea. Now, I would hope, and I don't know this to be factually accurate, so I don't know, but I would hope, I really, really would hope, that they didn't split up the Hurt Business just to go with this King Corbin element of the storyline. I would really hope that's not the case, because if that is the case, then they have just wasted a really promising stable, a really promising faction for no reason. Because if you really wanted to shoehorn King Corbin in there, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. King Corbin, or Baron Corbin at the time, Constable Corbin, whatever his name was, Corbin, Lashley, and McIntyre as a faction took place on Monday Night Raw in 2018. And it was towards the tail end of the year in 2018. Monday Night Raw during that year, especially the latter half of that year, was horrific. I mean, it was so bad. And that's not just me saying that. The higher up, the executives themselves, the decision makers, had to come out on television and say that the show was bad. Whilst this whole Corbin, Lashley, and McIntyre stable faction was going on, it got so bad. You had the record low viewership and the record low rating, which has since been beat, by the way, last year. Nevertheless, the ratings were so low, the viewership was so low, that Vince McMahon came out, Triple H came out, Shane McMahon came out, Stephanie McMahon came out, and they did the infamous speech. They did the infamous speech when they said, "We haven't been doing a good job lately." You remember that? And Triple H starts saying, "You're the authority. We're not the authority. You're the authority. We're going to give you what you want because you're the people that's important." You being the fans around the world, the fans in attendance, the WWE Universe, if you want to call them that. And that was the point at the time. So the show was so bad at the time that the higher-ups had to come out and say, "I'm sorry, it's such a bad show." And yet now, in 2021, one of the main storylines, or one of the main angles going into WrestleMania, the angle for the WWE Championship, is now surrounded or based on a faction that took place in 2018 when the show was really bad. Why would you want to be referencing that? Why would you want to use that and going, "Oh yeah, do you remember this? You remember how terrible Raw was?" And then the problem is with that is you start comparing it and you go, "Remember how terrible Raw was in 2018? And look when this faction was running around." And then you realise, actually, if fans actually compare then to now, if fans compare 2018 to 2021, they would say, there isn't much difference. There isn't much difference. It's still not very good. You know, the creative still isn't great. The Hurt Business was great. That faction there, that was great. That was really enjoyable. That was one of the high spots of Monday Night Raw every single week. And you split it up. Why? Because there's almost at this point, there's almost this, I don't know the best way to describe it, this fetish of breaking up factions or breaking up tag teams. It's just, to me, it's really bizarre. To me, it's really bizarre to the point of, it's almost like, and this is a real odd reference that not many people will get. I remember watching this video. It was a music video, and it was a really unique video in the sense that above everyone's head, you could see a clock. You could see this analog clock. Sorry, it's digital clock above everyone's head, and it was basically counting down their life. Right, that's what it was doing. And this person had this curse where they could see around, they would count down everyone's life. My point being is that if you're a faction or you're a tag team in WWE, that clock just might, you might as well have this clock above them that's ticking down to the eventuality of when they're going to get split up, or when they're going to be turned into single stars, or when they're going to have a different gimmick, or when something's going to move on. That might as well be the point. That might as well be the point, because if you're a faction in WWE, if you're a tag team, if you have a partner of any kind in WWE on WWE television, it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before you split up. The Hurt Business, I mentioned that the tension had been building and the infighting had been building for the last few weeks, but this has been going back for months at this point, because they can't help themselves. And the reason is because this so-called creative team, this team of writers, which is gargantuan, by the way. You've seen these meetings. You've seen the video footage or the photographic footage of these big meetings, these big production meetings, all of these writers and these people around a table. You've got a team of writers that goes to events. You've got a team of writers that are based in Stamford, and they have all of these big meetings, and they struggle. They struggle and struggle and struggle to come up with good ideas, good content, good creative from week to week to week, that after a few weeks they burn themselves out of what they could do for MVP or Bobby Lashley or Shelton Benjamin or Cedric Alexander, that the only idea that they have is to split them up. And it's a creative team that lacks creativity. And I don't mean to paint everyone with that brush, because I do think that's slightly unfair. I think maybe some of these writing teams do have good ideas and they do pitch stuff, but it's just, ultimately, like I said at the start of the video, it's one guy's company. And if he doesn't like the idea, he's going to shoot it down. Then it gets to a point of they start pitching stuff, just knowing that Vince McMahon will like that idea. Not that they think it's a good idea, not that they think that it's an idea that's good for television, not that it's an idea that they really want to pitch, but they know it's what he likes. And that's when it gets this sort of really, really weird realm of creative writing, that you're not writing stuff you feel is creative, you're not writing stuff you feel is good, you're writing something that you know someone else will think is good. And that just seems really odd. It just seems really odd. And that's the world of creativity in WWE, unfortunately. And that's what leads to stuff like the Hurt Business being split up way before they should be. I mentioned before, another great example is the likes of Evolution and The Shield. Now, I'm not saying the Hurt Business could have got to that level. Maybe they could have. I mean, they never had the time to get to that level. But those factions went through numerous WrestleManias and went through numerous hurdles before they eventually split up. The Shield, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns, they will say they thought they could have done another year being part of that faction. In retrospect, maybe was it too early to split them up? Maybe. They put them back together enough times after the fact. Nevertheless, they went through WrestleMania 29, WrestleMania 30, and then they split up later that year. So they were together for what? About 18 months, 2 years-ish, that kind of time. And even then, that might have been a bit short. Evolution, they got together. I mean, the plans were for before WrestleMania 19, but they were officially together after WrestleMania 19. They lasted all the way until WrestleMania 21, if you want to count Ric Flair later on that year. That's sort of 2 years, 2.5 years. That's how long a faction should last in WWE. If it's the Authority. If anyone should have been split up sooner, it would have been the Authority. But they had a ton of time. I mean, they were there at WrestleMania 30. They were there at WrestleMania 31. They were there at WrestleMania 32. You know, you're talking about 3 years of having that authority. I mean, it went through different variations, but the gimmick was the same. And just because you get to a WrestleMania season, that doesn't mean the faction should split up immediately, because there's more story to tell. There's way more story to tell there, because obviously you have to tell the story of the rise of the faction, the dominance of the faction, and then the fall of it. And the fall of it, obviously to me, would be after WrestleMania, when Bobby Lashley inevitably drops the championship to Drew McIntyre. Then you tell the story of the faction trying to get it back, or infighting with the faction. If you really wanted to elevate a Cedric Alexander, have Cedric Alexander challenge for the WWE Championship. Do a bit of a Randy Orton. You know, what happens when Bobby Lashley sees that someone like Cedric Alexander might have more success than he had? What happens when Bobby Lashley says, wait a minute, this guy is now the WWE Champion. I'm not saying put the title on Cedric Alexander, but that kind of stuff as well. That's the stuff you have to look into. That's creativity, that's storylines you can tell. That's getting the most equity out of the faction that you have on television, and ultimately WWE haven't done that. They've shortchanged themselves by splitting them up this early, and obviously MVP and Bobby Lashley aren't happy about it. I saw that Shelton Benjamin did a tweet, and I wish I had it to hand right now, but essentially he said that he was disappointed with what happened on Monday, and I don't think he's in storyline or in character there. I think he's disappointed that the faction split up, because there's more story to tell. There was way more they could do. Now, who's to say WWE, this isn't completely over, so I suppose potentially they could reform again. This could be something that they do post-WrestleMania. I don't know. My concern would be, for someone like Cedric Alexander or Shelton Benjamin, is what are we going to do after WrestleMania? And what are we going to do going forward now? Because once, for better or for worse, once they were featured into the Hurt Business, they had something to do. They were featured in every single week. They were part of creative plans. No disrespect to Shelton Benjamin, but I don't think coming out of the Hurt Business, he's hardly going to be featured going for the United States Championship, or he's hardly going to be higher up on the card than he was as being part of the Hurt Business. It's just not going to happen. And that would be a concern for me, because I think the best professional wrestlers of all time, whenever they're involved in any program, they're already thinking about what they're going to do afterwards. Okay, what's next? What's the plan after this? What's the plan after this? And the time where there isn't a plan after something, or there's no idea of what you're going to do after something, that's the time to be concerned. If I was Cedric Alexander and if I was Shelton Benjamin, I would be asking the writers, I'd be asking Vince McMahon, I'd be asking Bruce Pritchard, okay, you want to split us up? I disagree, but that's your decision. What am I doing next? And if they don't have an answer, that's time to be worried. That is time to be worried, and I think that's the concern for fans about this. I think the concern is that this was a positive and a string of negatives sometimes in watching Monday Night Raw. It just seems a waste. It really does seem a waste. But we'll have to wait and see. This road to WrestleMania, especially on the Raw side of things, has been incredibly bumpy. Obviously, WrestleMania is just around the corner. We'll be covering it extensively, including watch-longs, previews, predictions, all that kind of stuff. So be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and you won't miss a single thing. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on this new news about MVP and Bobby Lashley meeting with Vince McMahon over the breakup of the Hurt Business on Raw? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, gut the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.